Welcome back to the Talos of Movie Reviews with your co-host slash whatever I am, Mike. And once again, we've got the wonderful, the fantastic Drew.
The amazing. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me back.
I decided not to go with anything weird like Steve or Jack Kirby or anything else. I don't know why.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
you're you today, I guess, in my eyes. Except
I'm
you
me.
always are. So
Indeed.
we reviewed Amazing Spider-Man 2 finally. We got to the end of Andrew Garfield. It was a long trek to get to the end of Andrew Garfield.
So
My
long
goodness.
2 movies.
Yeah. Exactly.
Felt longer than the 3 Maguire movies for some reason.
It kind of did, right? Like, there, I think, well, definitely Maguire is probably more film time. You probably get a whole lot
Yes.
more Spider-Man. I don't know if you maybe get more Spider-Man. You might get the exact same amount of Spider-Man just because
Possibly.
of how much Spider-Man they throw into both Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man
Right.
2, while also simultaneously like balancing the Peter Parker storyline with whatever that side of the story is. But
Fair.
what'd you think, Drew? Out of 10
Yeah.
or out of 8, this is just to remind everyone, this is the worst, was it the worst selling or worst received Spider-Man movie ever?
Wow. Ever.
Yeah. People did
Dang.
not like this.
Yeah, I understand why. I'd only seen this once in the theaters. Hadn't watched it again until a couple days ago. And yeah, if I could think of one word to describe it, it would be redonkulous. There's so much silliness with this movie, and that just requires so much suspension of disbelief. I probably will give it like a generous 4 out of 8, possibly lower. If anything, I'm tempted to give it a 3, just because I had a really hard time getting invested in any of the characters because I felt like Gwen and Peter were so wishy-washy. It was annoying to the point of you could tell the screenplay was trying to do something meaningful, and there were a few moments that felt touching or thought-provoking, but it never really got going. It never really got the fire burning at the right rate because it's intermixed with, we've always talked about how it's kind of traditional for Spider-Man villains to be pretty weak with motivation and kind of basic with backstory, and there's a lot of plot convenience. But this is, I think, all of that campiness and all of that plot convenience and all of that weak motivation turned up to 11. It's like, yes, there's always been that problem, but in this movie it's like substantially worse than everything else. And also you have way too many villains being thrown out all at once. We've got Electro, who has to rhyme when he decides his name. We have, who I'm the most excited to see in No Way Home, Paul Giamatti as the Rhino. I want to know if he's coming back. Because, oh my god, I was just thinking of how Paul had to agree to this and saw this script at some point and was like, I'm a killer! the accent and everything. And also a very, very half-butt approach at Green Goblin at the last second. And, oh my god, I want to hear your engineering perspective on Electro start zapping through 110 outlets and transporting himself. It just, that's when we just started laughing at the movie, because just the fact that Elektra suddenly gets his own suit off camera at some point and now has a suit, or the whole backstory of just falling into, I think Kevin from The Office at one point said someone can get superpowers by falling into a tub of electricity, which is what this movie made me think of. But yeah, the whole character of Max was very distorted and bizarre to me. And despite this being, in my opinion, the worst Spider-Man film we've watched to date, it still has one of my favorite soundtracks, ironically, which I'm a huge Hans Zimmer fan, and I appreciate him, but it sounds like this was one of the movies that like made him decide he didn't want to do superhero soundtracks anymore. So I guess I have this movie to blame for that. But if you listen to the soundtrack on its own, it sounds great. But when it's mixed in this movie, it just comes across weird because there's like rapping going on when Jamie Foxx is talking to himself, and all this background voice on top of the movie dialogue, which I'm not, I didn't like as much on this rewatching. But yeah, so overall, unimpressed. I think they had some interesting ideas at a couple points, but pretty weak overall. How about you?
So surprisingly, I think this gets the highest score in my Spider-Man ratings at like a 6.5 out of 8.
Really? Okay, so this is your favorite.
Indeed.
Wow.
Out of
Okay, we're very different.
It'll probably, spoilers, it'll probably be a close tie with Far From Home, just because Far From Home's villain is, I'm a big villain sucker. That's
Yes.
why I could probably tolerate Spider-Man 1 too, just because there's a whole bunch of campiness, but the villains
Okay.
I'm there for. And where in Spider-Man 3 is kind of like, they're all kind of half-baked villains, whatever. And this one, it's kind of half-baked villains, but honestly, I think Electro sells it for me. Surprisingly,
Really?
like, I'm in the minority where a lot of people say his design was terrible, his motives were terrible, his dialogue was terrible. It just wasn't a enjoyable villain. But in my opinion, it was, I don't know. I enjoyed his arc, right? He went from like the loser electrical engineer who apparently like designed the whole entire grid, or at least helped design the grid for Oscorp, for them to take over the
Yes.
grid for Manhattan, and then just gets bossed around by the guy from The Office, and has to suck it up, and then ends up in a tragedy where he falls into a vat of electric eels. Oscorp is strange. All I have to say is Oscorp is definitely like in that reality where Apple just went bad. Like Steve Jobs just took them in a really weird direction. And then they just started using eels. Like, we're going to use the eels to power the city. We're going to put them in giant tanks. But,
Why has no one thought of this? Just use eels.
just use eels. But yeah, it gets a 6.5 from me. Just,
Wow.
I enjoy, like Hans Zimmer, like you mentioned, fantastic music. It thematically, he does fantastic in every single scene. Like whether it's Electro having his freak out in Times Square, or the final fight as well. Like he does fantastic in those, but also some of the minor scenes, kind of like when Electro starts taking over the city, and Peter and Gwen have to figure out how are we going to stop him. And there's some themes that he plays with, or some beautiful pieces that he injects where Peter's swinging around trying to get to Gwen because she's going to go to England. And then also being with Gwen when they're supercharging his web shooters, or magnetizing his web shooters.
Does that make sense to you?
Attaching leads from a car battery to your thumbs, which then the electricity path goes to your web shooters, that doesn't sound good for your thumbs or your body. Even though she line drops there, she says, "Oh, your suit will protect you from whatever." I forget what the line was, but it was enough to where it's like, wait, if the suit can protect him from like a car battery shock, okay, I guess maybe Electro's a lot more powerful than a car battery, but like he already has some of that like dampening of electricity on his suit. I don't think that's true, but okay. No, it is, the physics behind it is true. If you use magnets, you can move around electricity. It's Coulomb's law. Yeah. So it is a physical manifestation, or not a manifestation, but it's an interesting way to get around trying to fight Electro. And I applaud for them attempting something that sounds scientifically plausible.
They attempted, yeah.
But I think if we put the Mythbusters, we took them out of retirement, put the Mythbusters on it, they'd probably say, this is crazy.
Right. Well, Electro denies a lot of physics.
He does.
Being a human electric combo of some kind.
Something like that. You mentioned him kind of zapping through plugs, and honestly, that to me, that's some of the genuinely funny moments in the film where It's actually right at my favorite scene where Harry breaks Electro out of prison after like he's lost basically everything. He's about to lose everything, and he makes one final effort to get the power back, and he does it successfully by getting Electro out of prison. And then he and Electro go see what's his name? Doctor whoever. He becomes the Vulture, or he was supposed to become the Vulture in Amazing Spider-Man 3. Weird dude who was taking over Oscorp, basically, doing the whole power grab. Anyways, when that scene where they're interrogating him, or like they zap his desk, and then like he's like, "How dare you walk in here?" And then Electro just zaps him in the heart, making him fall. Like amazing. Like the comedy, I would say, is awesome because it's very dark humor, right? Like this dude's way out of his power grab scenario. He's no longer in control, and he thinks he is. And then Electro just slaps him in the face, like, "Okay, whatever, man." And then Harry's singing the Jeopardy theme or whatever while Electro's about ready to do some weird CPR thing. I don't know.
I say clear.
Clear. And he comes back.
There were a lot of weird lines like that to me. The "Don't you know I'm Electro" made me laugh quite a bit. Also, the electric eel's fixing his tooth gap.
Oh, yeah.
And they like highlight that. They zoom in on him. It's like, look, his teeth are okay now. I was like, what? Also, the number of people at this job at Oscorp that were like, "You need to go in and fix this pipe that's broken." So he's like standing across two safety rails to connect the pipe again. And he's asking for help. He's like, we need someone to disconnect this line. And he's like, "Nah, man, I'm out." Like, everyone expects Max to fix this problem, and yet everyone left the building, especially on his birthday. So he could not get enough of that birthday stuff. Talking to himself. I don't know. I've always felt weird about that character. I felt like Jamie Foxx plays a decent Electro, but the pre-Electro character just feels awkward to me.
He's very awkward. He's some weird...
Doesn't feel natural.
He's some very damaged mind that is genius as an electrical engineer, which sometimes genius comes from these outcasted minds that we've seen in history. So it kind of makes sense that, like, hey, he's a really smart guy, but he's just not all there. He doesn't have all his marbles. I think that's why... Maybe that's the lens that I see him through, even when he's Electro. Like, he's still a damaged mind. He's still that same nerdy dude. It's just now he's got a bunch of electricity, and he's able to shut off the power grid to where planes collide together for some silly reason.
They didn't have the tower to tell them to turn.
No, because they didn't have electricity.
And they're at the exact same altitude.
Yeah.
It happens, you know.
Sometimes, but usually, like, the planes, they tell each other. This is an inherent system in planes where if they see another plane coming, one plane will say, "Okay, go up," and the other one says, "Go down."
Yes. Also,
it's very unrealistic that the tower people would say, "Okay, you bank to the left, now you bank to the right." Like a Blue Angels formation.
My thought was they were going to both bank in the same direction and still hit each other. That would have been very dark, very much gold. How did you feel about Harry in this movie?
They did Harry dirty. Like we said in the Dirty Harry. Like we said in the previous movie, it would have been nice to have some backstory for Harry, or at least like inject him into Peter's life somehow. And then that way, when we see him in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and if they really want to do this transformation from him to Green Goblin or whatever, we at least have some background on him, or at least it's not like you just threw in this character just to make him a villain at the end, which that's good for if you want like a single villain, like for that movie, like Doc Ock or Sandman or something like that. But trying to do 3 villains and then also one is Harry Osborn. That's a tough sell. And then also all the other stuff like, oh, we're also going to kill Gwen in this. And then just a bunch of other plot points that they're trying to do, and also Sinister Six. Like
researching his dad simultaneously.
Oh my goodness! Don't even get me started on the researching the dad side of the story. Last night when I was skimming through the movie, because I watched it earlier in last week, so I was refreshing myself on it. I skipped basically all of those plot points, or like all of those moments of the movie. I just skipped straight to like the interesting ones, like Max talking to himself and then grabbing a cake out of the refrigerator. Like, it's interesting acting. But watching Peter just be like, I need to figure out this mystery, and I guess the answer is I put a coin in some coin slot, and then apparently they have the technology for this. The train tracks unfold, and then this train car pops up.
And then the computer on the train car finishes a download like the second it comes out of the ground.
Apparently, like, it just stopped for some reason, or it was on low power mode, so it just wasn't downloading at the speeds.
I'm also super grateful Aunt May knew exactly what train he took. Because that's where he
took the Roosevelt and got home at 6:15.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Apparently that top secret train car was well known to Aunt May. So she just repeated that. That was one scene I enjoyed, was Aunt May basically saying, you're asking for so much about your dad, and he wasn't there for you, and I was. So, you're my boy. I thought that was really well done. The whole parents' backstory felt longer than it needed to be. Like that whole prologue scene with the plane crash. And
they should have left that for something else, because the opening scene with Spider-Man, like the logo turning into the back of his suit and then him swinging around, that would have sold me on the movie. Like, this was an amazing opening. This is awesome. Yeah. Where instead
it's like 20 minutes in.
Yeah, after we get to see Peter's parents basically die, but then apparently if you looked more into the Spider-Man 2 movie, he didn't die, or somehow Richard Parker didn't die from a plane crash. I think, I don't even know if they said it was over like land or sea, but...
And why wait till you're on a plane to upload a file?
They didn't have any time. They had to get to the plane immediately, Drew.
The internet is so terrible on a plane. I was thinking when they were like, the plane was stalling and out of control, I was like, I'm not sure the internet would be working very well at this point.
To be fair, Drew, Richard Parker's a workaholic. He was playing hide and seek with his son, and instead of actually playing hide and seek, he just went to his basement and started downloading or like doing an audio thing or whatever. Like, he didn't even put in time and effort for his son. He just went back to his work.
Yes. He also, Richard Parker also looks like Tim Cook. Minor note.
Really?
It kept making me think of Tim Cook memes because he has like the gray hair and the glasses, and I was like,
is this the moment where Richard Parker starts peeling off his head and it's actually Tim Cook with a M1 Mac, or no, M1 iPad or whatever?
We have an M1 Max with just the face of Jamie Foxx on it. He's got electro performance.
It's electrifying speeds. Oh,
power to the max.
No.
Oh my god.
No.
Yeah, it was a weird thing to dwell on, and the way he finds the coins is just by throwing the calculator. I was like,
you have heard that, like, right? He shakes it, and it's like there's coins. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have my calculator.
This calculator seems to rattle a lot.
Yeah, like weird. At least with like I don't know, if it's Peter's that smart, I'm sure he would have had like a TI-83 or something, or like been able to find a TI-83 or 84. And those things they're not heavy, they're light. So like to have that many coins, somehow Richard Parker carved enough holes for coins in his calculator. Come on, dude. And then also has so many coins in there, like, dude, get like a little purse or something. I don't know at this point.
Right.
Insane. I was not a fan of the whole Richard or Peter Parker's parents' backstory in this whole entire movie. It could have been axed, and it wouldn't have changed anything.
It felt like they knew the Maguire movies didn't try to address that, so they were trying to do something different, but they didn't have anything really interesting to go with it, other than the deleted scene, which I thought was probably the most interesting part. but that's obviously didn't make it in the cut. So
There's multiple deleted scenes in this movie.
right.
I went on a big Spider-Man 2 deleted scenes kick last night until like I think 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, where I was watching all these deleted scenes, and there's the one with Peter talking with his dad, because spoilers, I guess, if you didn't know, Peter's dad survived.
Alternative timeline spoiler.
Yeah, I guess so. Peter's dad survived and then confronted him at Gwen Stacy's grave. And then Peter's like, why did you choose now to come see me? He's like, because Peter, I figured it out. I'm not the one who's special. It's you who are special, who are saving people. Mm-hmm. It's like, what a selfish dad.
Never wanted to say anything during the whole Spider-Man thing over the past year or so. No, we're going to wait till he's at Gwen's grave after like 4 months or something. 5 months or something.
Along with that, there's also some scenes of MJ, played by,
really?
I just blanked on her name, Shailene Woodley. Shailene Woodley? Huh. I'm sorry if you also listen to this podcast. Okay. She's been in the Divergent series, and some other stuff as well. And she's famously the MJ that we never got to see.
Yeah.
But there are some scenes where she sees Peter while he's trying to fix a car. For some reason, I guess Peter was fixing a car. I don't know why he needs a car, but he's fixing a car, and she comes in with her motorcycle. Another one I think Gwen was going to visit Peter at his house or something like that, and then MJ's just sitting outside. So I think what they were trying to do is, in the comics, Peter actually knew both of them and had love interests in both of them at the same time. And it just so happened that Gwen died, and then he got involved with MJ. I mean, I'd make it sound a little bit less genuine than
MJ
it is.
won his heart on a technicality.
What I did find out, though, in a lot of this digging, is that Gwen was never supposed to die.
Oh, really?
Stan Lee went on the record saying that he was going overseas when this decision was being made, and either it was done when he was gone or it was done when he was walking out of the office, and they asked, hey, Stan, we're going to kill Gwen, is that okay? And he was totally sidetracked with his mind, and he's like, sure, okay, whatever, because he just wanted to get going and get on the plane.
Sure. I just feel bad for the Stacys in this story. Like, they already seemed kind of chill at the graduation thing. The family, they're missing their dad, but they're just like, oh, come on, let's take a picture. Like all is normal. Now they lose Gwen too. This poor timeline. They just keep losing people. In Amazing Spider-Man 3, the Mrs. Stacy would have died in a car accident unrelated to.
That's okay. I think was it one of Gwen's brothers who was he's the guy, he's part of the meme where it's like, you guys are getting paid or whatever.
Yeah.
I think he's slated to be Adam Warlock in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So
oh wow.
It's okay. He becomes a superhero in the end.
It's all worth it.
But then he gets his brothers killed, and then
the Stacys can't survive these movies. They all just go away. But how did you feel about Gwen and Peter's relationship in this movie?
They were on and off like a little kid and a light switch. It was always flickering. It was like they're together. They even say it like near the beginning, I think in the first like 20 or 25 minutes, like, or maybe 30 minutes. They mention that they've had, or Gwen mentions that they have this whole roller coaster of a relationship where it's like, sometimes you're okay with us, other times you break up. You can't keep on breaking up with me.
And then they continue to keep doing that.
Well, yeah. She's like, I'm breaking up with you. And then like not.
It felt like this relationship was just wheels spinning in the dirt and not going anywhere. Like, first of all, my wife hated the line, I break up with you. Like, she was like, who says that? It's like, I break up with you.
Probably someone who's really fed up at being broken up with. So, like, someone who she actually cares about and wants to be with, and that person's just like, I can't do this anymore. I keep on seeing your dad.
I thought that was an interesting approach. The dialogue felt a little unrealistic, but just the idea of them breaking up because he's haunted by her dad. But I think what ruins it for me is like 15 minutes later in the plot, they're back together and they're like, well, let's just be friends. Also, you're adorable and I love you, but we're just friends, right? And then they just kind of keep doing exactly what they said. Then she's like, well, I got to go to England and Oxford, so
England?
bye.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on,
so
Pete.
they just talk in the beginning about how they can't do this, which I feel like would have been fine if they just didn't address it until the very end. But the problem is they keep doing this back and forth thing throughout the entire movie, which makes me go, I don't know. It's one of those experiences where you yell at the screen, I guess, of like, what are you doing? What are you just
I think
my wife also did not understand the point of I love you, but I want to protect you, so I don't want to be with you to protect you. It's like, what? I don't get it, but
I think they just needed a conversation at the end of Spider-Man 1. Like, sit down, have a long conversation about, I'm Spider-Man. That means things will become dangerous in my life, which means it'll become dangerous in your life if you get involved with my other life. So, let's try to figure it out.
Go get him, Tiger.
That's MJ. She'll say, I forget what she says in the other one, but yeah. They definitely needed to talk, but I think the reason why they kind of did this crazy roller coaster that they did was to make sure that Gwen was there at the power station. By the way, the electromagnetism coils, whatever they described it as, it didn't make sense.
And they play the Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Yeah, also when you hit them or whatever, or like when Electro's zapping around, it causes a sound, which I guess they do emit a hum. So if you power it up and power back down at a certain speed, maybe you could get a certain frequency. But
Electro was specifically thinking during this fight scene, I'm going to play Itsy Bitsy Spider on these power plant beacons. See, I was thinking about that a lot because I was like, that sounds hilarious and ridiculous. Redonkulous, I would describe it. But it's because of the context of the scene, and it doesn't really fit in with Electro's character to suddenly be like, I want to play a nursery rhyme. But they did the exact same kind of gag in the first Maguire Spider-Man. Green Goblin is singing it right before he like fires a bunch of missiles, but I think it works better there, even though it's kind of cheesy, because they've kind of established that Goblin is crazy. He's got this kind of sick sense of humor to him. So he's singing about the spider as he's like causing damage, whereas I didn't really catch that like sick sense of humor or that dark but happy evil laugh side of Electro. Electro just feels like, you know, always just electricity, power, I need more power, you know, like it didn't fit in with that character as well, despite it being a similar gag. So I was like, Defoe can sing Itsy Bitsy Spider, not Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, my only argument to that is zapping the heart of the head of Oscorp and then reviving him. That's some sick sense of humor of like knowing I can make this guy live again if I shock him in the heart and then just shock him again. Like there is a tiny bit of that, but I get it. Yeah, definitely in the whole.
I didn't see that as
movie.
Humorous personally. I saw that as kind of just a threat, you know, of like, hey, I can kill you at a moment's notice, so don't mess with me. But it is kind of funny when you think about it.
Yeah. Getting back to, was it Gwen? I was mentioning the power station because they needed her there, and it wasn't. They needed her there not because. I don't know. It was to be there for Pete. It wasn't to be there for Spider-Man necessarily. It was like, I'm going to be here because I want to be here to help the city and help Pete. Rather than, I don't know, her just randomly showing up, like, in the final scene. Like, I could see in my mind where, like, she's about ready to board her plane, and then she sees power out in the whole entire Manhattan block or whatever. And so she's like, oh, well, first of all, I can't go on my flight. But then two, I know the power plans, so I guess I'll go there. Like, that's a little bit weaker in regards to a motive, where in the how they actually went in the movie, it made a little bit more sense in regards to her motives of like, I'm going to be here for Pete. And also, like we said, I think in the second or third Spider-Man movie that we reviewed, Gwen Stacy's Einstein. She's a genius. And she's got that need to prove that she's a genius. Like, she wants to show everyone, hey, I'm smart. Like, notice me. And so after Pete leaves her at the hood of the car, in which the policeman doesn't even help her off the hood of the car, she immediately goes to the power station because she's so gung-ho on showing her smarts and showing that she is useful. So that's what I saw, at least, with her character and the motivation that they're trying to go with this whole relationship butting into these final scenes in this movie. But
yeah, I think they have decent chemistry. They still carried that over from the first film. When they're flirtatious with each other, it just kind of feels a bit more natural. But in this movie, to me, it felt more like realistic and natural, but kind of frustrating because they just can't agree on what they're supposed to do or what they're gonna do, and she waits till the worst possible moment to say, I'm moving to England. And he's like, oh. And also, by the end, Peter's like, okay, I'll just move to England with you. And I was like, don't you think it might raise a few red flags if Spider-Man's in New York all the time, and then Peter Parker moves to England, and then Spider-Man shows up in England for everything? Won't Aunt May be like, hey? And
she hasn't noticed before.
Yeah. To start making out right as you mentioned Jack the Ripper was kind of... it felt very awkward to me. I don't know. It was just a weird note to end on. They're like, they never caught Jack the Ripper, and then they just start kissing, and I was like, you want to talk about Jack the Ripper right now? And all the music's swelling up, and
because Jack the Ripper's still alive, even though he's like a early century, like, not folktale, but crazy guy that killed people. But yeah, that was kind of weird. But
it felt weird to me.
They are weird people, like what we said in the last review. They're very awkward teens, even though they're definitely above college age at this point. They're very awkward teens. So if they've got a kick for solving crimes like Scooby-Doo and the gang, sure. They can do Doctor Strange's wishes and Scooby-Doo this.
Scooby-Doo this crap.
Scooby-Doo this crap.
Yeah.
I still feel sad there wasn't any J. Jonah Jameson.
No, I mean, I think the closest we got, I don't know whether it was in the first movie or, I think it was in the second one where he's like, hey, I got the photos for you, Jameson. And he just responds with, wrong.
That's all we got. They were at least wise enough to acknowledge they could not top J.K. Simmons. So they were like, let's not try to.
Correct, but they did kind of get into some of the Amazing Spider-Man 3 stuff. They were planning on having him reprise his role as J. Jonah Jameson.
Was it J.K. Simmons, that actor?
Yes.
Oh, really? They were going to have him into a different universe. Yeah,
let me just tell you what they planned on for Spider-Man 3 since we're kind of going into that territory. They were going to have Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Shailene Woodley was going to be Mary Jane. And then Dave DeHaan was going to reprise his role as Harry Osborn. Paul Giamatti, of course. We can't forget him. He was going to be back as Rhino.
Most underrated Spider-Man villain.
We would finally get the end of that fight, hopefully, maybe. Or actually, like, the middle of the fight. We didn't even get we got, like, very sliver beginning of the fight.
I think that's why I left this movie with such a negative impression, is because that was such a disappointing ending to me. Like, compared to what I saw in some of the alternative endings, which were like a major twist, my wife, even though we had kind of stayed up somewhat late and we had a long day, right as the movie just cuts to black, she was like, what? That's it? She had that kind of desire for more, I think, because everyone was obviously excited for this big return. And of course, this being the last Garfield movie doesn't help at all, knowing that it doesn't really get followed up ever. Maybe it will be in No Way Home, I hope. But it was such a lackluster point to be like, okay, he's finally gonna come back as Spider-Man. He's going to stand up to Paul Giamatti. And then just cut away. We don't need to show that.
Cut to logo.
Yeah. I think you should have showed that. It was kind of the movie equivalent of cutting to black at the sound of a gun going off, which whenever that happens in shows, it's always like, come on. Just show us what happens, like what's going to go down. My thought process was that when he hits the missiles, which for some reason just change their trajectory when they hit something.
And explode all over, I forget what street they're on. I think it's right by Grand Central.
My thought was that he was going to deflect the missiles into the crowds of people that always have these like perfect
front row
guardrails set up. And there's just like an ocean of 100 people watching a gunfight in the street, and they're all just like, ooh, what's going to happen? It's like, who sets up these barricades before every shooting?
The police.
They're like, okay, you can watch, but don't come too close.
Oh my goodness. I guess we'll cut to that as well. What the heck is up with the crowds in this whole entire movie? They're always like, fight. It's like WWE. It's like, fight. Or like in the electro scene, which, fantastic music again by Hans Zimmer at that particular moment. But then they just cut to shots of like people being like, what?
Yeah, they're all just
it's like there's a dude who controls electricity, and you're literally surrounded by the biggest jumbotrons in the world, or at least the place that is known for electricity running through it ridiculously. Why are you here? Go away. Run. Like Gwen, like I said in the last podcast, run. Go away. Don't come back.
Yeah. They set up the barricades very fast and off camera, which always makes me laugh. But did you feel the Electro transition from I love Spider-Man to I hate Spider-Man was natural?
Not at all, because who the heck has a camera that has a live feed connected to all the jumbotrons in Times Square? Every single time I watch the scene, I'm like, this doesn't realistically make sense. First of all the other like companies who are running their ads through the Times Square billboards, like, they're not gonna like some dude taking over their ad space and their time. Like, that's not gonna happen. Also, like, that must be the most powerful wireless receiver. Like, they're running on 5G in 2014 or something like that. It's insane.
They've got ultra wideband.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I found it very, very sudden and quick, considering how big of a Spider-Man fan he was, and I felt like knew they had limited runtime to showcase the Switch. And I honestly actually think they were asking Hans Zimmer to help with this change in character because they were writing it into the music. He's like, he lied to me. He hates me. He's my enemy. It was like the movie. And
now he's going to die.
Yeah. It felt like the movie was putting basically text on the screen that says Electro doesn't like Spider-Man anymore. It was like,
no, they plastered it on the billboards. They went from blue guy to red guy. But it's my birthday. I'm gonna give you my cake or whatever. I forget what he says.
Yeah. I gotta blow out my candle.
That's what it is.
Yeah. I felt like they knew that the motivation was weak, so they were like, Zimmer, can you throw something in the music that makes it feel like he doesn't like Spider-Man anymore? And he was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, okay, just make him say these things in the soundtrack. That way people understand, okay, he's angry. I get it. And I guess their excuse is the electrification makes him more furious.
There's more power.
There's more power. Which is kind of the logic of Sandman, I guess. I don't know.
Kind of, yeah, except he's always been aloof. Sandman is always just like, I run. I punch. Where's the money?
Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out what Electro's game plan was.
He wanted to control the grid. I think, from what I gathered in the movie, like, he's always been this loser. He's always been stepped on, and now he's in power, so now he gets to make the rules and the decisions. So I think he had in his mind, I'm going to take over Manhattan. People are going to listen to me. I'm the ruler now, which is a very typical evil supervillain type of motive, which I'm okay with because no one's really heard of Electro before this movie, or like they haven't paid attention to Electro. So when you meet this guy who's just like, I've been stepped on my whole life, I'm going to take over, you get it. Like, The dude's been stepped on. Like, give him a break. No? Okay, well, you guys deserve this. Dang it, society.
Everyone deserved it.
We live in a society.
We live in a society. I think that it's not original problems these villains had. It's just that they're so much worse in this one than the rest. And Peter's on and off relationship with Gwen did not help the movie, in my opinion. It just kind of made it harder to follow and more frustrating. The one thought I had when Gwen died was, I guess that 14-year-old got the Oxford Scholarship. On a positive note, there's
good for him. Good job, kid. You won,
wins by default.
Yeah, you got into England just because someone died due to. They kind of make it ambiguous, though, right? In a way.
Yeah.
How do you think Gwen died? Did she die by her neck snapping, or was it her head hitting the back of the ground, or the back of her head hitting the ground? Like,
I would imagine the head, but yeah, they didn't want to make this R-rated because if this was realistic, her head should be like massively caved in on the back, you know, like that would have been much more graphic. But I guess it's more cinematic, and there's a interesting shot of the web turning into a hand as it goes down. But my wife thought that was cute and hilarious.
It is.
She was like, "The web is a hand now."
It does play sort of in line with the comics, because in the comics, instead of in the comics, Green Goblin drops Gwen Stacy off of a bridge, and what kills Gwen Stacy, in which the comic writers revealed this, was Peter. Peter killed Gwen by web slinging her, and he just did one web, I guess, and it got her foot, but because he pulled, that basically was like a sudden change of momentum, which then just broke her neck. Where it happens again multiple times, apparently, because the readers and comic book writers were so not polarized, but they were so shocked by this that they just kept on writing it because it was such an interesting idea. But instead, Peter learns from the situation. So instead of doing one web, he does like multiple webs. So that way the force is distributed, so whiplash doesn't happen and neck snapping. So it happens. I mean, they even did it in Spider-Man 1. Thinking about it now, right? Green Goblin drops MJ off of a bridge.
Right.
But she survives because Peter goes after her and I think grabs her. I don't think he webs her. I think he grabs her, which smarter move, but
yeah.
I guess he has the time in that movie, but in this time he jumps and it seems like he's like a piece of paper versus her. Where she's like all splayed out, like you'd think some air resistance would help, but instead, nah. She's destined to die, I guess.
She has to, yeah.
But speaking of dead people, in Spider-Man 3, kind of playing off of like what Spider-Man 2 was basically becoming, which was just a jump pad for Spider-Man 3 and Spider-Man 4, apparently.
Wow.
They were going to revive people from the dead.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, they weren't going to stop at I think there's talk that the guy who plays Captain Stacy was coming back.
Oh, really?
And then also Gwen was going to come back, and a bunch of other people were going to come back. It was going to be, I don't know, something with like his blood, because of course Spider-Man's blood is so precious, and it's just magical, I guess.
Yeah.
So magical, it turns people into green goblins and crazy.
Massive head, blunt force to the back of your head can be fixed by spider blood.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it didn't happen.
Huh. Yeah, I don't think that would have worked well in this universe.
But they did kind of set some of it up. I don't know if you noticed that Felicity Jones is in this. She played Jernoso? I can't remember how you say her name, but in Rogue One, the main character.
Oh, yeah, Jernoso.
Jernoso, yeah. She plays the assistant. Felicia Hardy? Yeah, she plays Felicia Hardy, who's Black Cat in the comics.
Oh, okay.
And then apparently Zooey Deschanel, if you know her from New Girl, was also supposed to be in it as Betty Brant. If you remember Betty Brant from the previous series.
Jeez.
And then they're also going to have Mysterio too, apparently, who's going to be played by Spock himself, Zachary Quinto.
Oh, wow. They had a lot of moving pieces then.
Yeah, and then also they're setting up a Sinister Six movie after this as well. And when they canned Amazing Spider-Man 3, Sony was still hoping to do the Sinister Six movie and a Venom movie.
That felt more obvious when they went down to Oscorp and have all these random
doors
weapons
with numbers.
Yeah.
1,
Might
2,
as well have
3,
the
4,
logos.
5, 6.
Yeah.
Who could be 6 villains?
And then they visit Harry in prison, and they're like, how many do you think? I was just waiting for him to say, 6.
1, 2, 3, 6.
Probably 6. Yeah. Or something.
That's all we need.
That's all we need. Yeah, I felt... I didn't like Harry's character. I felt like whoever they chose or whatever direction they told this actor to go in wasn't doing very well with trying to come across as just like a friendly, old-timey friend of Peter's. They felt like they went all in on, yes, he can be a good, evil corporate CEO, but in regards to just being a friend of Peter's, it didn't mesh as well as Franco and Maguire did for me. And he is too unreasonable. It's kind of frustrating how he's just like, hey, I don't think the blood will help you. And he's like, well, shut up, yeah, I will.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
My favorite line in this whole movie. You're a fraud.
Which he says to himself.
Oh, as Spider-Man's listening in and sees Harry throwing things around.
He was also like, how much do you want? He's like, I don't want your money. I was like, I don't know, Pete. That money could solve a lot of problems.
You can get a spider copter or a spider plane.
Yeah. Imagine if you bought a penthouse. You could help your Aunt May, who's, working 2 shifts to try to pay for everything.
You can move to England with Gwen without any financial issues.
And then just, this is not the heroic thing to do, but just give Harry some not spider blood and tell him it's spider blood, and he thinks it'll help, and then it doesn't help, and you'll be like,
"You're a fraud, Spider-Man."
Just like take the money and then be like, well, there's no assuring this will work, because we didn't really. Have we ever established that part of Spider-Man's powers is like self-healing?
I mean, I don't think they even mention it too much in the first movie. All they show is like he gets scratched by the lizard and he's fine after Gwen pats him with a cloth or whatever. So they don't. But
it wasn't like Wolverine levels of,
No, it ain't healing factor. It's definitely more like advanced immune system.
And you can fall from any distance. I noticed that a lot.
Yeah.
He catches Gwen and then he like falls 80 stories and then just lands on his feet and he's like, I'm good.
Yeah, or the scene where when it's like before Gwen's gonna die, she gets thrown from Green Goblin's arms. He catches her, which I think that would hurt because he's going up and she's going down. And then they go down and then he turns so that he goes through the glass, but then also lands like on a walkway, but he doesn't land on like the walking part of the walkway. His head/shoulders land on one of the crossbars or the railings, and his legs land on the other. Like, wow. Ow. If there's anyone who should have a caved-in head, it should be him.
Yeah. No, his suit protects him.
Oh, that's right, because he's got low electricity resistance. Spandex. Yeah, that was the word. I finally figured it out after that podcast, the last podcast that we recorded. I'm like, what is that? Elastic? No, it's spandex.
I think after rewatching this one, I preferred the first Amazing Spider-Man a tad more.
Really? Okay.
It felt, at least the first half felt a bit more like I understood the tone they were going for, of like trying to make it more gritty and realistic instead of cheesy and campy. Whereas this feels all over the place. It's like 1 second we're dealing with the concept of death and loss, and the next second It's like, oh boy, better stop that rhinoceros, and also Electric Man is running after you, and he can use any outlet, so be careful. I don't know. There's just too many conflicting like tones they're going at all at once. Because there's definitely Andrew Garfield's a great actor, I should say. Like they picked a pretty solid cast in my view until they picked Harry and they picked Max. I think Jamie Foxx as that nerdy character doesn't. The problem is Jamie Foxx is just too cool. Like you can try as much as you want to split the hair down the middle and give him the
I think he had a comb over, but yeah,
the comb over. And give him glasses, but even with all of that hype, it still doesn't come. I still look at him and just think, nah, that's Jamie Foxx. He's cool. He can't come across as the geeky, nerdy character that they were going for. And when I feel like everyone's universal reaction when Green Goblin first shows up is, ugh, because he just has this kind of weird hair thing, and when he tells him, like, inject this chemical, please, it'll make me better.
His gun
and then he
hand.
just instantly, yeah.
Such a dumb decision. Inject this thing into my arm, which I'll probably have a reaction to pull the trigger and shoot you.
He's, like, holding the gun at him. I was like, maybe put the gun down and then I'll inject it?
Apparently Venom's in that room as well. He's in one of those containers. And so is, was it Norman Osborn's head?
Oh, God. It's like the head of Walt Disney.
Basically, they're doing everything to like milk the heck out of this franchise. Like, Norman's gonna come back, and Venom's here, and apparently Carnage was gonna be a thing and split off into his own movie, in which it technically happened, right? They made a Venom movie,
guess so.
and then Let There Be Carnage, which I haven't seen. I don't know if you've seen. It's gonna come out on DVD soon.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it in theaters, so I'm like, okay, well, it's been this long. I'm gonna wait until it's out in theater, out of theaters, where I can rent it or buy it, and I'll just watch it at home.
There you go.
But
smart move. Yeah, I am shocked how much they were putting into this, expecting it to continue. And I haven't done my own research, so I don't know entirely. But from what you've told me, it basically sounds like Garfield single-handedly canceled all of it.
Not necessarily. That's what I thought initially before this, and he was part of it. The other thing was Kevin Feige, the one and only Kevin Feige. They were having talks at this time about having Spider-Man come into the Marvel Universe. And so I think he had meetings with, I forget what her name is, Amy something. She was one of the heads of this movie.
Schumer. She's a big Sony producer.
Ah, yes, Amy Schumer, our one and favorite Sony producer. No, Amy something or other. Anyways, Feige was having a meeting with her, and he's like, hey, we'd like to put Spider-Man in our movie and maybe recast him to be younger. And apparently she threw a sandwich at him. So
really?
That didn't go well. But I think they got their just desserts when Amazing Spider-Man 2 flopped, and Andrew Garfield said, I'm not doing anything else. I liked how the story was going, but then you guys edited this movie in the weirdest way possible. No thanks. And so they fired him, and then I think their plan was to do Sinister Six. Just go to Sinister Six and then put a new Spider-Man in there, and then have him carry the franchise. But I think talks with Marvel, they're like, oh, this might actually be a good cash grab. And then when Homecoming came out, they're like, ooh, we could have a top-tier superhero with Spider-Man, and we're going to get some of those profits. Let's see if we could get Iron Man. And that's why Iron Man's in Homecoming, not just because he's like Spider-Man's mentor, but also he's like the big cheese of the Marvel Universe. And to have him sitting right next to their golden boy who's going to give them all their cash.
Well, they experimented with Civil War first.
Yeah. So they wanted to see, is this good or not? And it was good. People enjoyed him and liked the suit and liked the age. So they're like, okay, I guess this works. But what's actually honestly surprising is that lady who threw the sandwich at Feige was also one of the, I think, executive producers of Spider-Man Homecoming. So
really,
if you want to blame her for tanking a franchise, go ahead. But she also brought us Spider-Man Homecoming, so it's not all bad.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting.
Sony had really weird plans, and I'm glad they didn't come to fruition because, I don't know, seeing like a Sinister Six movie and then like throwing in a random Spider-Man and then like having half-baked villains, I mean, it no, it didn't work for the not the Black Order, but I guess like Thanos's goons. Like, you didn't really get invested in them, and they were kind of like their own. I wouldn't call them Sinister Six, and that's probably not accurate per comics, but
the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, the night. Oh my god, that flopped ridiculous. It basically was that, right? That's what. Right. That's what. Not Rise of Skywalker, The Force Awakens. That's what basically The Force Awakens was equated to, I would say, in my mind, is Amazing Spider-Man 2. They're like, we're going to throw everything into this, and then they realize, oh, we can't.
Forget about it. Whatever. I guess something happened behind the scenes. Read the books. But, yeah. I think they made the right call, too. I mean, it probably would have been wiser to try to incorporate Spider-Man into the MCU earlier, if possible, because maybe Sony didn't quite foresee how successful Avengers was going to be. But once Avengers was a big hit and everyone realized that this whole MCU thing was going to work out, it's logical that they were like, okay, how do we work this in? And is it easier to reboot Spider-Man, or is it easier to keep what we have? And Garfield's opinion on the movie obviously didn't help, so they were like, okay, I think he's made that decision for us, so let's get as many young people as possible so that we actually have a Spider-Man that can last more than 3 movies. And they've got that now, so it worked.
I think he came in at the right time, in my opinion, in regards to the MCU, and I guess hindsight today, right? We saw him come in at Civil War as Tom Holland, and it's like, oh, new blood, and also they need more characters in that movie because Civil War was like, there's not that many superheroes fighting superheroes, and there's not really a lot of motives besides, he's my friend. But to like bring Spider-Man in, like, he's a totally green new member to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they're like, hey, Iron Man gave you this cool new suit, and he wants you to come with him. You kind of do, I guess. Yeah. Like, there's some incentive for him to be on that side rather than be like, oh, Captain America, I learned about you in gym class. Something like that. But, like, today as well, as what I was saying before, is like, we don't have Iron Man anymore. We don't have a lot of characters who either died or just aren't reprising their roles or anything else. And we live in this world now where we've got a whole bunch of Marvel TV shows coming out, which is great. But it also opens up like the big stage for what used to be maybe a smallish character like Spider-Man in Civil War has now become like the new superhero to anticipate and wait for. And everyone's waiting to see No Way Home because we've got all these movies of Spider-Man, and now we've got the finale, basically. I think it's the finale of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So we get to see what that looks like, and also if Sony continues to work with Marvel, or if they're going to diverge into their own kind of multiverse that is loosely connected to Marvel's multiverse, or it's just going to be different. I still have to see Let There Be Carnage, because apparently there's some scenes in there that hint that it's a multiverse on Sony's level. But
I heard about that.
I don't know, but I like where he is right now. I'm very comfortable with where Spider-Man is right now. I wouldn't want it any other way necessarily, unless I had to rewrite everything back to Tobey Maguire, I guess.
Tobey in the MCU. It's a whole channel, I think. That's something I could have gotten on board with.
Bully Maguire everywhere.
Yeah. They were like, we need to sign these accords. We need to be put in check. And he's like, I missed the part where that's my problem.
I'm out.
Right. Thanos is like, all that for a drop of blood. And he goes, I'm going to put some dirt in your eye.
Oh my
Bully Maguire with the Infinity Stones.
There's a lot of great fan edits of Bully Maguire.
There's
in
so
the Marvel
many
movies.
I love them all. Get a load of this. And then he snaps and brings everyone back.
Talking about characters in movies, I guess since that's what we're doing in this whole podcast, my wife is in this movie.
Really?
Yes, but not in the way that you think. Her name is in the movie. Her name, Kari, which is how my wife spells her name. She's also used in Ravencroft, but she's Oscorp's big big AI system that manages the elevators and everything else.
That was weird.
I totally forget what her acronym is for, but of course, artificial intelligence. But I don't know what the K stands
AI
for.
Stuff.
I don't know what the R means, but there's an A and an I in Carrie, so artificial intelligence. There we go.
Right.
So apparently my wife is software. So
okay.
I never had a wife. You've never seen her, and that's because she's a computer program in Oscorp.
This would be a great moment for her to just walk in. What are you guys talking about? My wife is software.
Why are you saying that I don't exist?
Well, I'm surprised, despite us agreeing on a lot of different things, how different our scores are.
I think it's a polarizing film for.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a big spectrum, I'd say, in my opinion. There's people who just go into these movies just to see a superhero movie, and they either like it or don't like it. There's those who are invested in the comics and go in, and they're like, this was terrible. Probably a lot of comic book junkies are like, this was a terrible movie. But I fall in the camp where I recognize the comics, and I thought this movie was fine. I mean, did it have its problems? Yeah. Could they have done a whole lot better with the story and the characters? Yeah. But I enjoyed the villain, and that's what made me so excited to see him in No Way Home as well, because it's like, that's probably one of my favorite villains, probably next to Mysterio. Mysterio is probably my favorite in the whole Spider-Man series, but
I do think he looks much better in the No Way Home trailer. Like, they have a different approach to Electro, and I like it. The blue guy thing wasn't working for me. I just thought it looked
yellow guy
silly.
better.
Yeah.
Yellow guy.
I was thinking of Paul Giamatti in Big Fat Liar, where he gets all blue. And you could have Paul Giamatti all blued out next to Electro, next to, like, Jake Sully from Avatar, and be like, the new Blue Man group is back in town.
Someone needs to put that on the internet. Someone needs to make that. Please.
I hope someone
tag
does.
us on Twitter if you're listening to this and you can do that artistically and make it look real good. Or just real terrible. It doesn't matter. If it looks terrible, if it looks
terrible
great,
too would be good.
please do it. Oh my goodness, I don't have time to do it, but I would love looking at that. I'd retweet that. Yeah, I
want to know how Paul Giamatti feels about this character.
I want to know if, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, I wonder if Paul Giamatti's in No Way Home. He's just, because, like you mentioned, we're recording this on the week that the second trailer for No Way Home came out, and we got to see 5 out of the 6 Sinister Six villains, unless Marvel's just like, we're going to mix it up, we're not going to do 6, we're going to do like 8 different villains, which then I'm not too sure how this movie's going to go, because 6 villains is already tough, but at least like it works in the comics, so there's at least some grounds for like trying it out in film.
Right.
But putting like 8 in there might be a little bit too much. Though I guess it kind of worked. I don't know. Even in Into the Spider-Verse, they had like, I think 5 Spider-Men or something like that. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't like
a
crazy amount, but it was enough to where audiences were okay with it. So, I don't know.
Right. They kind of bunched 3 of them together.
Yeah, Peter Parker, Peter B. Parker, and
Nick Cage.
Oh, you're saying when they partnered Penny Parker, Nick Cage Parker, or Spider-Man Noir, and Peter Porker. Yeah.
Yes. Those 3 all kind of came in a bundle. They were a complete package. So that helped. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. I want to rewatch that at some point. Well, probably doesn't tie into No Way Home very much, but it's still good.
Maybe we can review it after No Way Home and compare it to the multiverse that Marvel made.
Multiple multiverse Spider-Man movies to compare.
Yeah, compare multiverse Sony to multiverse Marvel. And see how these Spider-Men stack up together. In which, I still think, of course, like the rest of the internet, Toby and Andrew are still, or likely, in this No Way Home movie. I'm pretty sure it's pretty much confirmed at this point with the amount of
all but confirmed. Especially when Alfred Molina says You're not Peter Parker.
True, but he comes from a multiverse where there's a different Peter Parker, and it doesn't mean that it's necessarily Tobey and Andrew if this is a different Doc Ock from a different universe. But
It's Tobey.
it's
I just realized Toby's my dad's name and Andrew is my name.
wow.
Spider-Man, Talos of Home.
Talos of Home. No way, Talos of
Spider-Man
Talos
Home
of-
Pod.
On that note,
Cut to
then,
credits.
my goodness, any last thoughts on this fantastic, amazing movie?
Amazing movie.
This
I
amazing
guess I should say a
series,
couple-
right? We're ending this series,
Yes.
I should say.
They're wrapping up the Garfield side of things. I think that the character stuff was probably the most interesting. Like the dad being alive all this time, that was really, really well acted. Like Garfield handled that scene really, really well in the deleted scene.
Yeah, y'all should watch that on YouTube or whatever. It's not bad.
Yes. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's just top-notch acting. Even if the rest of the movie's kind of clunky to me, him finding his dad was like really, really impressive. But the Aunt May, how she feels about Peter, I liked. I still prefer this look of Spider-Man above all the others. Not so much the style of the plot and all the conveniences, but just the look of the suit is my favorite in this one compared to. I know that the Tom Holland one is going for more of the original Spider-Man look with kind of the thicker black lines around the eyes, but I just think the one in this one looks like the big eyes, the saturated colors. It's a really nice look. It's cinematic and it still feels fresh. A lot of the animation, some of it held up okay. There's a scene where he's grabbing all of the vials at the beginning that was all 100% CG, and it shows where he like catches a vial with his foot. And I was like,
his feet are that
okay.
sticky through the boot. Okay.
yeah. But overall, a lot of people did a great job on this film, including the CG department. The composer, Hans Zimmer, I think, did wonderfully. Of all the Spider-Man soundtracks, this is the one that I've listened to probably the most.
It's got dubstep. Who doesn't love dubstep?
Yeah, right. Everyone loves dubstep. That's what my grandma listens to.
That's also what Deadpool says.
Yeah.
I love dubstep.
Right. Deadpool is just R-rated Spider-Man, essentially.
Maybe we'll review him at... Oh, no, we already did. Go check those out.
Right. So, do you have closing thoughts?
I think it was very insensitive that Spider-Man called Electro Sparkles in a time that he needed sensitivity. Definitely that high, like, not investigation, but the hostage almost situation that Electro put Times Square in was not handled well by anyone. Spider-Man didn't handle it well, calling him Sparkles and just being like, it's okay, he's my friend, everyone. This is good. We're going to go talk.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I'm going to get him out of here because he's a giant electric mess. And then along with the police who are just like, yeah, we shoot. Even though that we just said, don't shoot, we shoot. I guess it kind of is the typical police thing, right? They say, oh, we're going to cooperate, but then also like they've got their own motives of protecting the public. So that's fine as well. But
sure.
yeah, I think that could have been handled a lot better. I love it. It was at this point that Electro took over Michael's 24-inch iMac. So in the spirit of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we will cut to the credits.